Good morning, everyone's already joined, and we'll just get started. The people who join later, they can just jump in afterwards. So thanks everyone for joining us to our first ADR chat session. The idea behind these type of sessions is rather than us giving a presentation, which is what we've done in past webinars, we really want to give the floor to you guys to ask your questions. So whatever you might be struggling with or whatever you might want to know about the ADR register, about ADR in your specific field, feel free to ask them. Together with me, I have Robert Tettelaar and Teresa Dupré. They both work with me at Global Network Group at the ADR Register. Teresa works in South Africa, so the people from South Africa, you'll be familiar with her. And Robert works in the Netherlands. And I kind of work together with both of them and help wherever needed. I don't want to keep the introduction too long because I really want to give the floor to you guys. I'm just going to do a short introduction in Dutch because we do have a couple of people joining from the Netherlands. And I want to welcome them as well. And the questions will usually be in English, but if someone wants to ask one in Dutch, that's not a problem either. Dus goedemorgen iedereen. Dank jullie allemaal dat jullie er zijn bij de eerste ADR chat sessie. Het doel van vandaag, daarom wil ik het ook kort houden, is om jullie vragen zoveel mogelijk te beantwoorden. Dus als jullie vragen hebben, stel ze gewoon. We doen de webinar via Zoom. Dus als je je microfoon aanzet, dan kun je gewoon die vraag stellen en een van ons zal hem beantwoorden. Dat gezegd hebbend, gaan we nu gewoon beginnen. Dus als iemand een vraag heeft, wees gerust om te stellen. So if anyone has any questions, I don't know who wants to start. I think it's best that we just jump right in. So you do have to unmute your microphone and then just ask whatever you want to do, or you can do it via the chat and I'll just read it out and have one of our three panelists answer the question.
I think one of the questions that, I don't know if everyone was here already, one of the questions was that what Stella had is, are we in South Africa going to discuss Rule 41 still? And we said, yes, we will. We'll find someone to do that. And that being said, something that we would like to know, not only here, but also for the Dutch people present, is what webinars would you still like us to do? Are there any specific topics that you would like us to still address? You know, whether it could be something that can cross over both to English and Dutch, or whether it's just Dutch, Robert will answer you there, or Giel. And whether it's in South Africa, I'll see what I can do. But I think we're finding that people are enjoying the webinars, especially now that we're still in lockdown. And we would like to find something that, you know, that you're interested in, something that you would like to know. Nothing that you can think of. It's so quiet. It's Monday morning. Stella wants to say something there. Yeah.
Okay, so I know we're still going to discuss it, but maybe you guys have got the answer already. So specifically with the Rule 41, so I spoke to an divorce attorney, and she said, okay, so what they're doing at the moment is they just tell the client that you can go for mediation if you want to, but that's... So it's not a question of at the moment that the client actually sees a mediator, so that the mediator can establish whether a mediation would be suitable for them or not. Because I thought that was the whole intention of the ruling, that, you know, that a client would first see a mediator, because that's my understanding. That's how it works in the UK at the moment. Before you can get divorced, you've got to go to a mediator. The mediator then does the interview with one of the parties. It doesn't even need to be both parties present, although both parties must have gone to see a mediator. And then depending on what the outcome is, the mediator then, if she or he established that mediation would not be a suitable route for the couple, then a certificate is then issued by the mediator that then that with that certificate, the client then goes to the divorce attorney, and with that, it goes to the court. But it seems like from that, because there's a Form 27 that needs to be filled in, and nowhere on that form is any indication that the client has actually seen a mediator. It's basically just saying, the client has been advised of mediation, but you know, it's there's no. So I don't know if I'm missing the point somewhere. Or...
No, so at least internationally, there's a couple of ways that either governments or courts typically approach regulating mediation. And so what you mentioned with England is true with family mediation. So you have mediator information sessions, and you have to attend those, and you can attend those together or separately. And in most cases, it will be a legal requirement for family and divorce to go there with some obvious exceptions as far as it relates to children. But that's basically what's called the opt-out model. So you have to go to a mediation, and you can decide, okay, we don't want to go this route, we do want to go this route. And at least the way we've read the Rule 41, at least the way we've interpreted it, is basically it's an opt-in model where you have to submit that form, and then someone has to say, no, I want to try mediation, rather than specifically being confronted with it. And then how that attorney necessarily proceeds that, there necessarily, you know, gets that information to the client. There isn't that much written in the rule there. It's more, you know, you have to fill in that form, and then that will determine how it works. And you have to document your reasons for not using mediation. And so it basically means you can't necessarily say, I'm not going to use mediation because I don't want to. You have to actually, you know, give a reason for not doing it. But it's not the case, at least the way we've read it, that there is a requirement to go to a mediator for specific disputes and sit down in them with a session, and then, you know, come out with a report, yes or no, or we're going to do it. Because there's also not a sanction system built in. I mean, they have that in Italy, where, you know, you have to go to a mediator. If you say, I'm not going to participate in that, you might get a sanction. That's also not something we read in the Rule 41 ruling, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
And so it does really appear to be that light model where people just, you know, it's about providing information, and that's really it. And that's something we've seen more governments do. I mean, we have kind of a similar system in the Netherlands with some differences, but what we call doorverwijzing, where a judge can actually, you know, inform parties of mediation, that has a similar system to it. But it is then really up to the parties to decide, do we want to do it, yes or no?
I think that's one of the big things in South Africa, I think basically in the world, is that we need to get the public out there to better understand what mediation is and what mediators can do and offer. And that's something we're working on to see how we can actually get it out there. We've got a few ideas, but we obviously need your input as well. And maybe that could be a different webinar where we only discuss ideas on how getting the information out to public on what a mediator is, what a mediator can do, why it's better to mediate before you litigate. Most probably not in all instances, but I would say in most instances it's better to mediate than litigate. Specifically in the family law arena, I think mediation plays a huge role. I think most of the people here on my side are on family law side. So I think that's something we really need to do, is to get people to understand why they're saving a lot of money and time, especially now with courts being backed up. In South Africa, so many court cases are just hanging. There's nothing happening. And if people understood the benefit of using a mediator, I think a lot would have been gained at this point. So that's something that we're definitely looking at, is to get the benefits of mediation out there. Jackie?
Myself. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, Teresa, I think I totally support that, and I think it's very necessary. I don't know who watched Carte Blanche last night, but there was it was about all the little businesses that, due to now the corona situation, are losing trade, are losing their businesses, and have knocked on the doors of their insurance companies who are not home. Because the clauses that are provide for a virus situation can't be applied to the current situation. And it was interesting that a list was provided of the route that these restaurants and whatever could take to fight these insurance companies. And it was a whole list, and in between was arbitration, and in between was an ombudsman, and then at the end was the court. But nowhere did the same mediation, which to me, as a commercial mediator myself, was the obvious choice for those kind of disputes. So, you know, obviously those kind of situations are awaiting case law, because it hasn't happened before. There's no precedent set as yet. But in the meantime, these things should be mediated, these situations. So yeah, I actually chuckled. I thought this is, and especially with Rule 41A now, there hasn't been a better, that's the positive of Corona. It's almost like this with the courts now, so completely overloaded and going to be overloaded. Now they all go to reopen. It's just a no-brainer that mediation should relieve that and be promoted. So yeah, it's a special seminar to brainstorm around how we're going to do that would be very useful.
I think it's a good idea if we do something like that.
Look, one of the things we're working on our side, because I think, Jackie, generally in the industry, but I think you and I share the same thinking about the courts and about the solutions to it, also with Ombud and everything. So I think what we're pushing for and what we're working on now is actually proposing a framework, both for standards, so that you can come to one common standard for different disciplines of ADR, which will include mediation, and it will obviously include Ombud and other things, and a regulatory framework where we can actually say, okay, how are we going to embed ADR, not just mediation in the courts, but also on the supply side with businesses. And so I think it's good if we'll be finalizing a white paper on that, on our vision of that, which will include concepts like advocating for an opt-out model. And so I think it is good that we host a webinar on that. I think Teresa can plan that, where we just discuss through that framework and how we see, from a legal perspective, from what the government can do, what they might be able to regulate, and what they might be able to implement to actually promote mediation, and not just mediation, but the other type of disputes as well. Because, for example, for low-cost consumer disputes, you might want assisted negotiation or ODR, right, where it's much more applicable. And so there is, because it's such a flexible set of disciplines, you can cover a really wide range with it. And the potential is there. I mean, Italy, when they implement their opt-out model, I mean, they have, in some specific cases, they've reduced the amount of backlog by 500,000 cases. I mean, that's an insane amount of, that's a very large number. And so there's definitely a lot to be gained there. Okay.
Giel, sorry. Can I just watch in there regarding something that Jacqueline just said now? We all think of the High Court and the High Court system with the Section 41A and all that. But when I spoke to the magistrates at large about 4 areas, I found that they have no clue about legislation or that there can be mediation in the magistrate court. Actually, they don't even know how to conduct mediation or the forms involved or anything like that. So the problem lies with our magistrate courts. And that is also the problem with family law, domestic violence and all that. Yes, it works in the Gauteng and Western Cape because there's a family law forum and mediators are concentrated there. But down in, like Karen, me in Eastern Cape and all that, the magistrate doesn't know about mediation or what we can provide to the courts.
Look, what I want to say, and I think it might not answer your question, but I think it is the point that I want to make. In general, even the Rule 41 article, it won't necessarily lead to an immediate and massive spike in the amount of mediation cases. And that's not me just being pessimistic, but it's just based on the fact that we've seen this model being tried before. And even in places where mediation has been a profession for 15 years, where it's relatively known among the population, and in this case, I'm referring to my own home country in the Netherlands, human psychology is a bit weird. They won't necessarily choose mediation unless they have that information, sit down in a room. And so even if the courts were to know, and even if the courts were to provide the correct information, there seems to be something in human behavior that they simply don't necessarily en masse choose mediation. I mean, even in systems where the information that we provide is sufficient and is documented, it will only lead to maybe an increase in 3,000 to 5,000 mediation cases, and that might be a lot for a couple of practitioners, but that won't, you know, that won't create a functioning mediation market. And the measures, they will just have limited effect. You know, we're talking about increases between 5 and 10%, which even in South Africa, you know, it's not insignificant, right? It's a good it's good, but it is nowhere near where we need to go. If you look at the amount of court cases there are, the amount of mediation cases there are, you know, that's just nowhere near proportionate. And so what we need, or at least that's our opinion of it, is a more fundamental rethink of how are we going to implement the system to actually advance these various ADR techniques, not just patchwork where we just have a court providing some information and then, you know, hope the lawyers pick it up. You know, because that's essentially what Rule 41 is doing. It's saying fill in a form and you'll get provided some information without setting any standards for the quality of mediation, because in, you know, fundamentally a single register that's being implemented, or a set of institutions that will promote it. And so it does really feel a bit of patchwork. And so it will probably have an impact, but it won't be fundamental. And I think that's where we need to go to. And I think that's also where we've seen division in our own market, you know, where people disagree with one another on quality standards, on the ways to lobby. And that's something that we need to achieve, where people actually come together to form one vision and then actually advocate for that, because that's something that's been missing. And if we look at the models where it's worked successfully, even in England with those mediation information sessions, they work. And it's not that we're taking away people's access to justice, under no way, but actually providing them with quality information, saying it will save you time, it'll save you money, you'll be able to keep the relationship, which doesn't happen too often in courts. Those are just benefits, and people need to be made aware of that, and it needs to be made easy for them. And that's something that we, you know, I'm not seeing that in the Rule 41 ruling. I just don't see that happening.
Gil, you're absolutely correct on that. What I've seen in my experience and working with the courts is that if you want to get anything done, you need to actually go out there and you need to step up and you need to actually meet with the people, you know, and tell them I'm available to do these services. So, I mean, so South African legislation and the number of court rules out there are absolutely massive. I'll be honest, many of the courts don't know many of the rules. So I found myself in situations before, especially a couple of years back when mediation was still relatively unknown in South Africa, where I needed to meet with the court staff in advance. And I had to almost drag it from my end to get it implemented. So, I mean, if you do find yourself in a court district where the magistrates aren't falling over their feet to mediate, that's a good thing. It means that you are going to be the first one to get to the to get to that particular court. Yeah. So it's a mixed blessing. It's definitely not just a bad thing. So I mean, I'm sure in time it'll develop further. No, look,
but it'll have an impact. There's no denying that. I mean, just like the rulings in the Netherlands where the courts have provided, they've had impact. I mean, it's 3,000 to 5,000 cases, not nothing. But when we look at, you know, the fundamental question of how many court cases there are against how many mediation cases there are, and in Europe we have this stated goal that it needs to be proportionate, that is nowhere near the case. And I think that shows that there's still a lot to be gained. And so my point is more that with this ruling we might get, you know, it might be one step, but there might be 20 more steps to go. And so that's where we say, okay, then a more fundamental rethink is going to be required. Because I think what you say is important. You know, you say there's not a uniformity of standards, so it'll take maybe half a year before everyone's picked it up and everyone's become aware of the ruling. You know, so the implementation will be slow, and eventually it'll get picked up. That is a pattern that we've seen. You know, obviously courts, they need to take time to process the information, and then it will have an impact. The question is, how big of an impact, and is that enough? And that second one is one where is a question to which I'm saying it probably not. And maybe, you know, maybe it'll defy expectations, but based on historical experiences, it's unlikely to have, you know, a more fundamental impact, that it finally, you know, gets embedded, that mediation and ADR in general becomes more embedded into society. That's not necessarily what I'm seeing. And so I think it's a good idea, Teresa organizes a webinar where we share some of our ideas, and then we can just discuss with each other, okay, how would we go about approaching that? You know, coming together to, for example, you know, having one set of standards, or having just a common framework, so that there isn't 100 rules in every single province. So that, you know, when you just go to one website, you can get all the information. You know, these type of simple goals, they are important. Yeah, and Sophia, for the work permit, so that's something I think, Teresa, you want to perhaps give a little bit of information about in general, because that's something that we provide.
Yes, SAM provides it, and we provide it as well, is that if you want to travel, well, at this point, it's actually sort of mute because everyone can work at the moment. But we provided the travel permit for people that needed one to be able to travel, you know, from their office to their home, because you're actually not allowed to do that. You weren't allowed to really do that either. So, but from today, everyone can go wherever you want to go, basically, except cross-border. And that, in any case, would not be able to help with. You'll have to get special permission for that. But we did provide the work permits or the travel permits, allowing people to travel. So in Sophia's case, you will be able to travel in any case. But I'll chat to Sophia about her file. So, and it seemed to help. It seemed that a lot of people did manage to travel and do some mediations. So I'm glad about that, happy about that. But from today onwards, you can go wherever you want to go within reason and stick to the curfew. That's as simple as that. But if there's any problems with that you do find that you have with it, just let us know and we can see if we can try sort it. But I think it should be fine. It should really be fine.
Thank you very much. It's just sometimes when we cross between the provinces' borders, you get somebody that's really, really difficult, and that's the only problem.
Yeah, I think the way that works is that you need to get a special permit there from a magistrate to be able to cross borders. That we can't really assist with. But I'll find out for you, Sophia.
Look, we can still issue them if, you know, if there's just,
yeah,
I mean, I've seen that in the Netherlands at times where someone just wants to see some piece of paper and doesn't really check what it is. So I think we can still issue them, but legally speaking, they won't necessarily have too much effect. So I mean, we can't really guarantee they'll work, but issuing them in the hope that someone sees a piece of paper, sees Corona and says, all right, go ahead, it's still possible. Yeah, so if anyone else has any questions, yeah, feel free. Dus als iemand nog vragen heeft, stel ze gerust of in de chat of jezelf gewoon unmuten. Yeah, Teresa?
Sorry, I see it's also nice to see Alexandra. Yeah, Alex does RICS, so it's more the commercial side, the building construct side. And they also obviously had the same problems as, you know, most of us has. Luckily, they can also start working, most of the guys in the industry can start working on the construction sites and everything again today as well. Yeah, so it's a nice mix that we've got today. And I think if we can do a webinar with someone in all the different fields, we're going to get to a point where at least we've got something to work from.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you, Teresa. The last one, I had a bit of problem. I think these are great initiatives that we can discuss from various industries, different disciplines, about what's happening with mediation and all our challenges. And yeah, thank you for the invite.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay.
It seems quiet. No questions. Oh, there's Francois.
Yeah, Teresa, I think you can handle that one.
Okay, Francois, as far as I remember, you are a lawyer. Francois is a lawyer, as far as I remember. So the best way would be, as Barry said, we're finding it literally in most of the fields at the moment is to get up and go and see the people that you would like to work with and mediate with. especially in the courts. I don't know in the Free State, Francois, I think you're in Bloemfontein if I'm right. But especially here in the courts, you have to go out and make sure that you're part of that court annexed list. But even then, you're not ensured that you're going to find work from that. So I think the best would be to go and see the person. And in Bloem, it's a bit easier. I think it's smaller, to go and see the people and explain to them what you do and what you can do, what you can offer, and take it from there. We are making contact with a lot of the people in justice, in the law communities, at magistrate courts, to explain to them as well in the time that we have, what we can offer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come to the party. So I think the best thing is to go out, meet face to face with the clerks and the magistrates and say, here I am, this is what I can do. How can you help me to help you, sort of thing. That's the point to start with, I would suggest.
If I may add in at this point, so marketing and mediation practice is definitely a challenge. It's something that all mediators all over the world find it difficult, especially at the beginning when nobody knows who you are and the services that you provide. So what I've found really well is using a very broad approach, focusing not just on the face-to-face marketing, which is definitely a key part of this, a key piece of this puzzle. Going out there, making the relationships with the courts. In that respect, what I've done before is I would introduce myself to a new court where I intend on working in their district, and I would meet the court staff, and I would actually offer my services for pro bono work, just to get a foot in the door. And I would ask the magistrate, please give me the 1 or 2 cases on your desk that are just an absolute headache. Give me a challenge, something that I can do for you. So that's a part of it. And of course, when you successfully mediate these cases, people will talk about you at court. What I've also done before is to say, well, if you do again run into instances where you need a pro bono, talk to me, but bear in mind, I'm not going to be the pro bono guy. I have a business to run. I'm not going to mediate all of my mediations for free. And you can find informal referrals from courts that way. You do need to actively market your mediation practice, at least at the beginning, until you reach a kind of a critical mass where your previous referrals send you enough work to keep you busy. So you'll need to focus on traditional marketing, and you'll need to do some digital marketing as well. Now, what is a good idea is right at the beginning of your mediation practice is to get a digital presence up and running. Get a website, get a Facebook page. As much as all of us enjoy Twitter and Pinterest and LinkedIn and all of those things, get those profiles up and running. It's always nicer to, if you hand somebody a business card, or if you tell them about your practice, to have it at a place where it's really easy to find you. So if you were to Google the mediator's name and surname, would you immediately be able to find them on the internet? In terms of traditional marketing, there are some strategies that work. Some of the strategies that work really, really well and cost either nothing or very little is to do editorials for local newspapers, where you actually write articles, and that's incredible, incredible marketing for your practice. In terms of digital marketing is a little bit more difficult. I don't think this webinar is going to have enough time to cover digital marketing. But when you've reached the point where you want to do digital marketing, you'll need to allocate a budget for that. And what you can do is you can actually have adverts running on Google, adverts running on YouTube. But I mean, that's a little bit, that's higher level marketing. I wouldn't necessarily do that right off the bat as you become a mediator.
Yeah, and I think what you say for courts applies to business as well. I mean, in general, go where disputes are found, and so that will be, chambers of commerce and things like that, where networking groups, where businesses come together. Tell the same to them. You ever have a dispute? I'll try and help you solve it. And that's just more of a general marketing thing. I mean, how many companies offer teasers for their products where you get 1 week free? You try it out once, and if it works, and in this case, if you solve the dispute for them and it doesn't cost them that much, they're going to come back. And again, if you find one business, that they'll talk to each other, there'll be a next one, and eventually, I think, Barry, that's a great phrase for it. You will reach that critical mass where people start talking to each other, courts start talking to each other, and you, in the end, start getting enough disputes going. So I think definitely just go wherever disputes can be found. And from our side, yeah, market your certification as well, because that obviously helps set you apart a little bit and shows that you fall under things like complaints, like complaint handling, etc. That helps for clients as well. Stella? Yeah.
So I'm also a brand new mediator. So I just want to find out from the more experienced mediators, because I was thinking with this COVID-19, I'm sure there's a lot of people that is in a position where they fell behind with maintenance or they're unable to pay maintenance. What would you say? Because I'm sure there must be a great market there now to assist people with redesigning or renegotiating their maintenance obligations. So I don't know if somebody maybe has had any experience in that now lately, where and just to give some guidance on the newbies on what the approach would be.
Teresa?
I don't know. We will have to check that and maybe Barry or Jackie would be able to assist you, because I think looking at the list that we've got here, they most probably are the more experienced guys out there. But yes, I think definitely there would be, a gap for something like that, and maybe going to the maintenance courts and seeing what's happening, chatting to the guys, getting a feel for what is really happening in the field at the moment. But I think either Barry or Jackie will be able to guide you on that with regards to experiencing that at the moment. But I'll see, if there's something we can maybe tap into and let you guys know. At this point, I won't be able to assist, but I would say that something that makes sense to me as a first step would be is to make contact with maintenance courts and say, this is something I can offer. And see what happens. With looking at social media, definitely. I mean, if you look on Facebook, so many parents are complaining. This one's complaining. I started unfollowing so many people, but people are complaining that we're not getting the maintenance that we should be getting. Also, there's definitely a need out there to renegotiate or replan, start from scratch.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an age-old question. Where do I get my clients? I mean, we know this kind of miasmic group exists out there, and and we know that the need is definitely there, but we don't necessarily always know where our clients are. You mentioned Facebook. That's actually one place where our clients meet. Under normal circumstances, where do our clients also meet? Where do they go once a day on every school day? Well, they kind of meet at school. A school is a platform for mediators where you can actually engage.
Or church, yeah. Seeing that everyone can go to church again.
Yeah. Think of all of the different places where these people would meet. I'll give you an example. Divorce care groups on Facebook. There's plenty of those. And I'm sure this is a worldwide phenomenon. We've been seeing reports all the way from the courts to the hospitals, to psychologists who mention that the domestic violence, but I mean not just domestic violence, that general disagreement and unhappiness in families is higher now than it was before lockdown. So I mean, if you are able to join support groups on Facebook, that's a place where you can find clients. There are even really big legal talk groups on Facebook, where people talk about, or where people ask for legal advice. Yeah, I mean, plenty of different places. The question for every mediator is, and that's something that, I mean, that only you can answer, is in my immediate community, where are my clients? And the best way to answer this question is put yourself in your client's shoes. Let's say, for instance, you have issues with maintenance and you're not receiving maintenance payments. Where do you go? Where do you talk to? If you're having trouble answering this question, speak to your friends, speak to your family. Ask them, if you have a problem with not receiving maintenance, what do you do? What do you see as a solution? And you'll be surprised at what you find. There's really incredible value in doing that kind of market analysis.
Yep. Teresa, I know you wanted to answer one question.
Yes, Elisma is having a problem, I think, that many mediators that are new to the field have, and that is, how do you find a niche or a market for yourself if you don't have a law background or a psychologist background, psychology or social work background? And I think Barry sort of answered the question, and that is, where you will have to find the niche that you believe that you want to be in. And Elisma, I just quickly checked, I wanted to make sure, but you did the course with Barry, so you are in the family law arena. So I think maintenance could be a nice niche for you to look at, as Stella was mentioning now. Where I'm seeing a lot of people asking for mediation is on Facebook specifically, and on the single mothers pages, where they, as Barry said, they also they complain and talk and say, what can I do and change, the single parent pages. But I think if you want to enter it from a different angle, first, Elisma, you have to decide where you want to be and what you want to do, how you want to position yourself. Do you want to go into the family law arena and focus just on that? And I think that would be a good place to start, and just focus on one thing initially, and find your footing first before you start moving on. And I think you can offer as much as anyone in the legal field, or the social work field or psychology field, with doing the course that Barry presents, because you do touch onto a lot of that. But if you feel that you don't have enough experience, obviously there are courses out there that can give you more experience. And maybe now that we're still in lockdown, invest in looking at that. But find your niche first, and then find a way to work through it. And I see Robert wants to say something as well, so I'm sure he will also give you an idea of what to do.
Well, what I would like to bring in is that everything that I'm hearing now is about formal mediation. So we consider there is a conflict and we want to start a formal mediation procedure. And yes, that's part of mediation, and we're not going to exclude or discuss that, but there is more than that. If we look to the preventive side, we see a huge world asking for how to avoid a conflict. And I think this is the time, this COVID-19 framework we have now, is the time to say to people, okay, we can offer services in preventing. And what I want to mention is this: consider yourself using mediation technique without being in a formal mediation process. So simply, if you guide people in negotiation, if you are a project manager, whatever, add mediation technique into that and spread the news. Say to people, how did you like that? And may I tell you, this was a kind of mediation. Because what we see from our side on the ADR Register, quite a lot of people have no clue at all what mediation is. They know the word mediator, but mediation as a process is a black gap. And if you are successful in spreading the news by showing them, by giving them experience with using mediation techniques, that's a very relevant and successful marketing instrument. So I say, just start, whatever you do, mention to people you're using mediation techniques and see that as a first step. From a commercial side, I really believe that we as mediators can benefit from being active in the preventive field. So that's one thing I want to bring in. Another thing, a lot of things we're talking about now is what I call shooting to an individual, which is always difficult. It might be an idea also in South Africa to discuss with all of us, with the professional organizations and ADR Register, what can we do to have access to branch organizations? And I give an example. I'm quite sure that a lot of people are struggling at the moment and, for example, go to an organization like CIPC, where they register the companies and mention, I have issues. So how nice would it be if we have a kind of agreement with CIPC in which if they heard that people, organizations are having issues, that they refer to mediation and spread the news that there are organizations like SAM, like ADR, etc. For example, a second one, I'm quite sure that people will report themselves with communities and municipalities to say, listen, I'm facing difficulties. Do you know the way? How can I get rid of that? That's where we can come in. If they are aware of our organizations and our techniques and our processes, they can simply learn people how to navigate and show them the map, the roadmap to mediation and to the organization ADR Register. So what I want to bring in, to summarize, let's think a little bit out of the box if we talk about marketing and perhaps try to cooperate on this and project-based start some action.
Look, the only thing I want to add on to what Robert says is, and that's something that I think has been fundamentally missing, is that sense. It right now it does appear, and that's not necessarily in Africa alone or in Europe. That seems to be in most places, that it's everyone that it's, you know, everyone does their own thing and no one really works together on these type of things. And when we talk about mediation and you know, the usual perceptive people have when they have a dispute is they go to court. And everyone relatively has an idea of how courts work. You know, they might not know the specific rules of procedure, but it's fundamentally in almost every culture, you go to court, that's when you have a dispute. And that's something that we have to change, and that'll go bit by bit, you know, project by project. But it is that culture shift that we need to work on, and that will require a general consensus. And some of that will be on the legal side, and a lot of that will be what we have to do as a market together in order to promote it and in order to generate that awareness. Jackie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it was something I wanted to add to Elizabeth's a statement or question regarding not being a lawyer nor a health professional. I'm neither either, so I just wanted to, I don't know what her background is, but I'm an accountant. And so many years ago, I also had this problem that was frowned upon because I wasn't a lawyer or a health professional. And now it's become my my niche and my, what you want to call it, people seek me out because I have a financial background. And funny enough, most disputes have a financial element, whether it's commercial, family law, maintenance. And I get a lot of clients because I understand numbers. So rest assured that if you can find your expertise and whatever it is that you do well, you can market yourself as such. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that's also something that sets us apart from some of the other organizations, is that we have subtypes. So when you apply with us, make us aware of the fact that you do have financial background, you do have a background in agriculture, whatever the case might be, and we can add that to your profile, which is invisible. Obviously, we audit it to make sure that you do, in fact, have the background in what you say you have. But it then appears on your profile. I mean, people look for someone specifically in the accounting field, agriculture field, in debt relief, whatever the case might be, they're going to find you there. And it will definitely generate work for you. So just make us aware and go and look at your profiles and see if there's something that's not there that should be there, and make us aware of it.
Yeah, so we have one question for Francois for me. I'm not sure if he knows that. He asks if I found it easy to adopt between operating in Europe versus South Africa. In the case you ask about specifically for mediation, I want to say that I'm not a mediator, so I can't specifically say how it works in the market, and my job is more to understand the regulatory framework. And in that case, yes, because it's not necessarily that different. You know, there are some small tweaks, and in Europe we see it more embedded in the culture, right? So we've done a little bit with laws and regulations for the past 10, 15 years. So, you know, we have as a society, we have more understanding of mediation. I think that is the case. But specifically to operate, the problems are pretty much the same. You know, there's still conflict between professional bodies, and the standards are maybe a bit different, but fundamentally they're pretty similar. And so what we see is that those two countries, but in general, you know, internationally, there's a lot of shared, there's a lot of overlap between the various systems. And I think that's also why we're able to, you know, to be successful in South Africa and in Europe with a similar system, because I think, you know, there is that overlap. You know, it makes sense in both those continents.
I think Jackie can actually comment to this, because she does work in South Africa and in the Netherlands at the moment. Am I correct, Jackie?
Teresa, I haven't worked in the Netherlands. You know, I spend a lot of time in Holland, and I have reached out and connected with the various mediation organizations there, but I actually haven't worked in the Netherlands because I'm never there long enough. So I'm there 4 times a year, but a couple of weeks, and then I come back to South Africa. So I have a good feel of what's happening there, but I actually haven't worked there. I would love to though.
Stella?
Just another thing, just to reiterate what Robert was saying, some ideas for marketing, and that's what my intention is. I'm just finalizing my website and everything, and then I want to do that, but maybe the other mediators can also maybe consider it. I know, like big companies, like I used to work for MultiChoice. They've got a program, employee assistance program. They call it ICAS, where whenever it's 24/7. When you've got a problem, you dial this number. They've got people then hearing what your problem is, and then they refer you then to an attorney or a psychologist or whatever your needs are. So my plan is to get onto the panel of these big companies. So I know MultiChoice is a big company that's got that. FNB, APSA, all those big companies has got these employee assistance programs, and I know you know, they've got the likes of psychologists, attorneys, a wide spectrum of services, and I think that's a very good idea to be on a panel of these big companies. I don't know if any mediator that is present today has maybe tried that route, but I think that would also be a good way to market yourself and to educate the public about mediation.
Elsa? Wait, wacht even 1 seconde. Ik moet even je microfoon aanzetten. Wacht even. Ja.
I'm going to try a route via MKB service point, which is sort of a thing that you were talking about, Stella. And lots of problems come in there, and they sort out the route for these questions that they get in. And one of the routes might be mediation. So that's where I'm going to try to look into. So that's sort of a branch organization in the Netherlands for small businesses.
Yeah, so what Els is talking about is basically they're just collectives of smaller companies. And we have those in South Africa as well. I mean, for the coaches, you can think of registers like the coach register, or even for ADR, but then for other sectors. You know, every single sector, even, for example, ICT companies, they have these type of collectives where they either go in for networking or for a common certification standard. You know, these type of organizations, they exist everywhere. You know, and just the networking organizations, there are hundreds of them in South Africa, and you can approach each individual one of them and say, look, let's, like Barry said, let's write an article, or you know, let's establish a way that we can help your members, you know, with a discount or with some pro bono work. You know, there are hundreds of ways you can do that, and there's thousands of organizations that you can approach.
Yeah, although, well, what we're doing at the moment as well, but we need your help. And although that's not really part of what ADR Register is, but we are approaching people, for instance, at the moment I'm approaching, and I started long before lockdown, but now it becomes more difficult, but it would have been prudent that if we had the contact already, but with governmental departments like Department of Health, they are now making use of mediators on a huge scale to settle a lot of the disputes that came along. I don't know if you remember, there was that sad story about the one old lady that they tied to a bench and then left her there because she was a bit mental. So her family won the case through mediators, and they're now using mediators. We were made aware of the Road Accident Fund in South Africa that is now positioning themselves that all the overflow work, and because of lockdown and all the backlog, they are now just using mediators to work on the road accident funds. Cases, the court cases. So, but someone had to actually make me aware of that, because it's not always general knowledge. So if you hear of instances like that, please let us know. So we then make contact with, like, for instance, the Road Accident Fund in South Africa and say, guys, we've got mediators for you. They're all on the books. They're all accredited, registered. They're above board. They've got certificates. They've done courses. We can look at your criteria and build that into what you need for a mediator. So we really try and make contact with all these organizations and bodies to see how we can assist you to get a better inroad there. But sometimes we don't know about all of them. So if you hear of someone, just let me know. We can follow up. But yes, the Road Accident Fund is one of them at the moment that is now just looking at mediation and not litigation to get past all the backlog.
If anyone else has any other questions, feel free. You know, these are really open sessions, so you can just unmute your microphone and whatever you want to know, we're more than happy to help you out with that. And as I think everyone's already seen, you know, we can share from each other's knowledge. So Barry will jump in, or Robert, or Stella, or Jacqueline can jump in and help you out as well.
I've got one here that you will have to answer, Robert or Giel. Do you acknowledge courses, COURSA courses? Yvette is busy with a course in international children's rights as well as international law tribunals, Hague, public law, pipeline prosecution, international tribunals, arbitration court, and ICJ. And she wants to know, she loves the Hague and the mediation between states. So COURSA cases, or courses, I'm not aware of that. COURSA. Let's just have a look, Yvette. Sorry, I'm not knowledgeable on that.
I haven't heard of it. What we do know is, obviously, it depends what the techniques are that are taught, and Robert can evaluate more on that. But what he can definitely do is offer you a subtype in that. So I think one of the things you mentioned, because it was quite broad with, you know, the International Criminal Court of Justice, and, you know, you mentioned pipelines, that might be a specific subtype. But I'm not sure what the specific course is. And Yvette, you're more than welcome to provide some context. But in general, if it has the basics.
Sorry, it's presented by Leiden University. But I'll have a look at it and get back to you, Yvette. I'll investigate. Robert?
Look, in general, it's not a problem to do so, even if they're not an agency. That's the Robert.
I just want to add, it's anyway qualifying for CPD purposes. That's one. And if we have the accurate information, we might consider to add it as a subtype, as mentioned by you. So I think that's those are the options. And let's promise for now that we go into it and we come back to it in the newsletter.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that was a question. Okay. Look, if no one else has any questions, and it's obviously you don't have to ask them now. If you have any other questions later on, feel free to ask them as well. But otherwise, we're just going to end it here because we've done now an hour. We have recorded the meeting, so we will be sending it around. So if there's anything you want to come back on or anything you think of later that you might want to review, feel free. And we usually get those published within the week. And then we'll publish them on Facebook and the other social media. So for now, I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank everyone for the questions and for being so helpful for one another. And we will be doing these more regularly. So if you just have any questions in between, it's our idea to just host one of these once a month or once every 2 weeks, depending on demand. So also for people who are just applying and they have questions, they can just come in, ask the questions, then leave again. That's kind of the idea behind these sessions. For now, thanks everyone for joining. I want to wish everyone a nice week and a nice rest of the day.
I just quickly, before we say goodbye, I just want to give Yvette my cell number. She's looking for my cell. It's 082 712 5680. 082 712 5680. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.